Get this show. Awesome. We are so excited to have one of our veteran presenters with us. Sarah Owens has been just with us for years, I think almost from the start. And today she is here to talk to us and present to us and engage us in explore, experiment, and excite with science in the preschool classroom. So Sarah, welcome and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. And thank you for having me again. I am always really excited to come and present.
It's our pleasure for sure. So Sarah's a full-time early childhood education instructor at Penn Foster, and she's currently working to complete her master's degree in education. She has experience working in both early childhood settings and special education programs and classrooms. And she really has worked hard to develop her classroom management skills, her lesson plan development, and really honed in on differentiated instruction. She's presented on numerous topics in early childhood education over the last 8 years. And like I said, we are just so fortunate to have her here today with us again. So Sarah Owens, the floor is yours.
Thank you again so much for having me this year. I'll just apologize because I am a little bit under the weather. So if I have to pause and mute myself, I apologize. But today I want to talk to you about exploring, experimenting, and exciting with science in the early childhood classroom. And I really picked this topic because I feel like it's one that a lot of educators struggle with because it's a little bit intimidating. There's a lot that goes into science. There's a lot of different topics that can be covered. And so I want to just help you be a little bit more comfortable with that and to help you understand kind of what the expectations are for learning in science in the early childhood setting. So like Stephanie said, my name is Sarah Owens. I was a preschool teacher for several years before I joined Penn Foster College. So that is where I'm an instructor right now. I'm also a mom to 3 young kids. All 3 of mine are 10 and younger. And I'm a lover of all things science. So we love to do science experiments here as well. And I was always a big science experiment promoter in the early childhood setting when I was teaching there as well. So like I said, I wanted to just kind of cover science because I do feel like it's a topic that is intimidating to some. We really know that young children instinctively learn through exploring and experimenting with their environments. It's kind of a natural process that they go through. And it's really, science is an extension of that natural exploration that young children are already doing. But we struggle as teachers to implement that and to embrace that really, and to kind of give them that freedom to explore and to test different things out. It's really our job to encourage and support children's natural exploration, to allow them opportunities to experiment. And we do that by providing them with those engaging, exciting, hands-on opportunities for science in the classroom. So that's what we're going to be focusing on today. So before we jump into that, I just wanted to give you an opportunity to kind of share your comfort and confidence levels with science in the classroom. So there's 2 questions here. You can just answer A, B, or C for both. But first, how comfortable and confident are you with implementing science experiments and activities into your classroom? So are you A, very comfortable, B, moderately comfortable, C, not very comfortable at all? And then how much variety do you feel you successfully offer in your science and discovery center within your own classroom if you are in a classroom? So again, A, a lot, B, some, or C, not much. And I'll give everyone just a moment to kind of reflect on that and to answer. Great, and it looks like a lot of you have already answered. We have a lot of answers, it looks like, around the B, moderately comfortable, B, some variety. So my hope is that just with this session today, you gain a little more confidence and a little, some more ideas that you can really use in your own setting or take and put into your teacher toolbox for later use if you're not already in the setting. And science is really an area I've observed a lot of classrooms. I've worked with a lot of different teachers teachers over the years, and it's an area where I've seen a lot of teachers struggle. So if you're feeling stuck or you're feeling unsure, know that you're not alone. It's not just you. It is an intimidating topic. While it's really fun, there's a lot that can be covered. So as teachers, we know that it's really important to ensure that our activities, our materials, our lessons are helping to develop or enhance specific skills, right? We're always looking at the skills and concepts that have to be developed for each domain or area. And naturally, we just gravitate towards those activities and materials that we're most comfortable with or that we're familiar with. So it's really easy to get stuck in a rut with providing the same types of activities and materials within a center over and over again. That can happen really with any type of learning center, not just science. So one way to combat that is to have a good, solid understanding of all of the skills and the concepts that are covered under a specific domain or area. So that's kind of where I want to start. So that you have that understanding. So when you think about science, it's a rather broad term and there's a lot of subcategories. So having that understanding is going to allow you to better select and prepare your lessons, to choose materials for your learning center, and even to develop those independent activities for your science center. So throughout this session, I'm actually going to be referring to the PA Keys Early Learning Standards for pre-kindergarten. And I do that because I'm in Pennsylvania, so those are my state learning standards. Those are the standards that I'm very familiar with from working in the preschool setting. But it's really important, I say that because it's really important for all teachers, as you know, to look at your state standards, to understand what the expectations are, and to work on always linking your lessons, your materials, your activities back to those state standards. That way you know that you're really truly working on the information that your children need to be developing. And so you want to reference and familiarize yourself with your own state's early learning standards. And I find that while the setup for learning standards from state to state is quite a bit different, typically they're covering the same types of concepts or the same concepts. They're just going to be formatted a little bit differently. So it's really important, if you haven't already or you don't already, to bookmark your state standards and to refer to those frequently. So Pennsylvania's early learning standards actually break science down into 4 subcategories. We have biological sciences, physical sciences, earth and space sciences, and environmental and ecology. And in a bit, we're going to look at those specific concepts for preschool children and what they should be exploring and developing and understanding for within each of those subcategories. And then I've also included a 5th category, which is scientific inquiry skills, because this is typically incorporated into the other subcategories when we're going through later on. You're going to see that there's actually a standard for scientific inquiry at the end of most of the categories. But I think it's important to point this out separately also so that it doesn't get overlooked, and because it can involve more than just what is covered within these specific standards. So before we get into the development of your science learning center and looking more closely at those science subcategories, I just want to talk quickly about your role as the teacher in the science process. So as with all lessons or concept development, the goal is never for you to conduct lessons or to conduct an experiment and then just explain to the children what's happening, what's going on. Our goal really is to create and provide these hands-on engaging experiences for children where they can actually carry out those experiments, where they can explore and experiment and think about the questions that they have related to those topics and what information they want to find out through those experiments, and then work through solutions to problems or find answers to those specific questions that they've developed, both independently and with support. They're not going to be able to explore every single concept independently. You're going to have to help guide them also. So I just wanted to cover what your role will be to support children in their scientific inquiry processes, really. So the first thing is to develop a high quality science center. We should always have a high quality science center in our classroom where the children can go and they can explore different materials. You can choose specific concepts that you want them to work on from week to week, but you're going to be providing those specific materials and activities that they can work through, and then you can kind of observe also to see where they need some support or guidance, where their interests lie, and then how you can change those materials. Also, you're going to want to take science outdoors. That's really important. As with any lesson, you can really take everything outdoors, and I highly encourage you to, but you don't want to limit the children, especially with science concepts, to only what's provided in the classroom. There are so many learning opportunities outside of the classroom and in nature that they really, really need to have the opportunity to explore. You're also going to provide a variety of materials that allow for many skills to develop or concepts to be explored. And really importantly is to make sure that you're changing those materials out regularly. You want to gauge the children's interest in those materials and see what materials they're not gravitating towards or not using at all, what their specific interests are. Don't be afraid to change your plans to meet their interest levels, so that they are maintaining that interest and really gaining everything that you'd want them to gain out of that experience. And then also to allow children time and a wide variety of opportunities to explore concepts. Sometimes time can be limiting for us, but really the children should have free time where they can go and explore those concepts and the materials that you've provided, and be able to pose those questions that they have and find those answers. You don't want to limit children to, let's say, 15 to 20 minutes in the Science Center at a time, because they're not going to be able to work through those processes sufficiently. Then also you're going to be planning out some lessons, but also you have to remain open to taking the lead of the children. You don't want to fear that spontaneity. Make sure that you're open to creating spontaneous activities or going with the flow once in a while so that you can follow what the children's interests are. If they find something outside, let's say, and they have a question about that, you want to make sure that you're able to give them the opportunities and the materials to explore that further, and not just brush them off or push it aside. And then also, you want to make sure that you're helping the children by asking specific questions once in a while. You don't always want to be the person who poses the questions. You do want to give the children opportunities to think of questions that they have related to the specific concepts, but you might find where children aren't coming up with questions, or maybe there's something specific you want them to take away from your lessons or the activities and materials that you're including. And so you might pose a specific question, which just kind of helps guide that process along. And then also introduce and use vocabulary that's related to your explorations. So don't try to, let's say, dumb it down for the children. The children are very smart. They're very capable of understanding new vocabulary. You just need to introduce it appropriately and use it. Help them use it also. So things like organisms, genetics, investigation, words related to the scientific method. You want to make sure that you are utilizing them. You could even create posters to include in your science area, or little cards that they can refer back to kind of think about that. Or those questions and those terms, and make sure that you're using them in the conversations, that you're using them correctly. Also, it's important for us to teach the children, even at a preschool level, what the scientific method is. Again, this is something you might want to have on a poster or on cards the children can use to follow the scientific method. But it is important to teach them what the process is that they're following as they're going through those explorations. And then also just guiding them through the inquiry process. So helping them to find the answers, to helping them by providing them with materials that they need to find the answers to their questions. And just remember that science isn't just about those end results or the answer to the question. Children are learning so much through the process of exploring concepts and trying to find those answers. So be open to that as well. It's not just about the end product. So when you're developing a basic science and discovery center, I'm just going to talk about like basic things that should always be there. And then you're going to always obviously put in materials that are going to be more specific to your theme or your topic of study, or if you chose a specific science area that you wanted to cover specific concepts on, you're going to be incorporating materials there. So I'm just going to be covering kind of the basics to help get you started. And then you would always be putting in more materials and different materials related to those specific themes or concepts. So these are just ones that should always be available to your students. And again, just make sure that you're rotating them and changing them regularly, engaging the children's interests and questions and what they really want to be exploring. So the first is tools for exploration. And I do encourage you to be really creative with this. You don't have to just stick to what you can purchase from, like, let's say Lakeshore Learning or other education sites. You can be really creative. You can purchase things from the dollar store. I always found tons of tools for my science area at the dollar store. Just remember that those materials can be a valuable teaching tool in your classroom, and expensive doesn't always necessarily mean better quality. Turkey basters from the dollar store are just as good and do the same exact job as those water droppers that you can buy from Lakeshore for probably about triple the price. And so I also learned that there are some items worth spending the extra money on, like magnets. Magnets are a really excellent tool, and they're a really important thing for children to be able to explore and use and see the different things that they can do, but they can also pose a serious hazard and be dangerous if they're not used correctly, if they break, if a child puts them in their mouths. And I always found that those higher quality magnetic toys held up a lot better. You still always want to make sure that you're monitoring the children and checking the materials regularly. But those higher quality magnets always held up much better for me than anything I would maybe buy at like Walmart or the dollar store. So you just have to kind of gauge what's most important. And then also recycling. Recycling is an excellent way to incorporate materials into your learning center. It is part of science concepts as well, reducing waste and teaching the children how to recycle. But you can do a lot of different things with those recycled items, like toilet paper and paper towel tubes can become ramps and tunnels for your science center where they can explore the different motions of toys and things like that. The second category is living items. And sometimes students and even coworkers cringe a little bit when I say that you should have living items in the classroom. I was always one who had plants. I always had a class pet, and I always wanted the children to be involved in the processes of taking care of those things. And the inclusion of those living items is very important, and it really allows the children to explore the characteristics of living things, which is something we're going to cover soon, and their varying needs. So I'm not saying that you need to go and have a dog or a cat in the classroom, but fish, turtles, small hamsters and guinea pigs, even a rabbit. Rabbits are fairly tame, especially if you handle them regularly. They can all make great classroom pets. You do, of course, have to check for allergies. And then plants are also great living items for a classroom. If you're not feeling adventurous enough to have a classroom pet, definitely incorporate some living plants into your classroom that the children can help you take care of. You could have just regular plants that don't produce any type of flower or fruits or vegetables, or you could have plants that do produce fruits and vegetables, and the children can learn about gardens that provide us with resources. And if you can't have them in the classroom, if you have an area outside even where you could create a garden that the children could help maintain and build up, that's also a great opportunity. I do apologize. And also, it's always important with plants and with animals to check with your families about allergies, and also just to check for permission from your center directors. I actually worked for Head Start, and I got a little bit of pushback at first when I wanted to have class pets, but then they did go ahead and let us, and they saw that it was just a really great opportunity. And I never had a problem with it with my children. So these provide opportunities for responsibility to be developed also in the young children, not just science concepts, but learning responsibility and how to take care of something other than yourself. And then they're going to be learning those differences between living things and what they need to survive. And then the third category is natural non-living items. So it's also really important to provide children with opportunities to explore natural non-living items in your Science and Discovery Center. So we always have non-living items like toys, shelves, things like that in our classrooms. But I think it's really important for children to see that there are a lot of non-living items in nature as well, so that they can explore the differences between living and non-living items. So those could be things like rocks, clean shells, leaves, sticks, bark, dirt and soil, sand. We always went on nature hikes to find different items that we wanted to include in our science center, and we'd kind of work it around the different seasons. We'd bring snow in even sometimes in the winter for them to explore and do different activities with. So you can just be a little bit creative. And again, just make sure that you're providing variety and you're using those materials in different ways, that you're not just setting them in the learning center and leaving them be. And you want to just try not to include the same exact items over and over again, obviously, because students will become disinterested. So just as an example, when I was conducting a farm and farmer theme in my own classroom, I used to include things like ears of corn, both fresh and dried, because once they're removed from the plant, they're no longer considered living. Unsnapped green beans, pumpkins, pumpkin seeds, flower seeds, and some other plants related to farming, things that we would source from those farming. And since they are, like I said, no longer connected to the living plant, they are considered natural non-living items. So the children can have that exploration as well. While they were on the plant, they were living. Now that they're not, they're no longer living. And as I mentioned before, don't be afraid to extend your lessons and learning outdoors. So this, again, does not just apply to science. I encourage you to take all sorts of lessons and activities outdoors whenever possible. But going outside, children are given more opportunities to explore in both structured and unstructured activities. And that's really important. We don't always want to structure their learning. We don't always want to plan every step that's going to happen. When we take them outdoors, it really opens the possibilities. They're going to be naturally just exploring and finding new things that maybe we hadn't thought of. And they're going to be coming up with some questions of their own. So that's always really important and helpful. Also, it can help develop and improve awareness, reasoning, observation skills, concentration, eyesight, sense of wonder, cognitive abilities, problem solving, and it helps reduce stress in young children. I know I see a huge difference in my own children when they've been cooped up inside for too long, especially at the end of the winter, compared to in the spring, summer, fall, when they're able to go outside and explore and kind of exert some of that energy and just be kind of natural in that environment. They're much more pleasant and less stressed and cooperative. So now we're going to start going through the science topics, and I'm going to review just quickly what concepts are learned, and then share a few activities related to each of the standards. So I'm not going to cover every single standard with an activity, but I gave you like 2 to 3 examples for your teacher toolbox related to each science topic. So what you see listed on the right-hand side of my slide is the specific standards from Pennsylvania related to each of these topics. So biological sciences actually includes living and non-living organisms, genetics, and evolution. And I feel like this is one of the topics that's probably a little less complicated to incorporate into your classroom. I feel like we do this a little more naturally, and it might be the topic that we're more drawn to. But I'll just quickly kind of go over what each of these covers for you. So children, when they're looking at living versus non-living organisms, they're going to compare living versus non-living. They're also going to learn about living versus non-living, living items needs, such as food, water, and shelter. They're also going to explore the basic parts of living things and then how living things change and grow over time. And I don't want you to let the terms genetics and evolution scare you away. I know you might look at those and say, what are we going to teach preschoolers about genetics and evolution? But genetics is really at the preschool level, children exploring and comparing the physical characteristics of living things within the same species. And then evolution is looking at the changes that occur or have occurred in animals from generation to generation. So the first activity that I wanted to share with you, and there's a lot more on my Pinterest board, which I'll share with you at the end of the session, was how does a leaf breathe? And this is such a cool activity because that's something that we might talk about and we might mention it several times, but it's not something that we can typically see. So it's a fun activity and experiment for children to actually see what that means. And in this one, you'll be covering photosynthesis and respiration as your new vocabulary words. And I also marked in green here on the slide which specific state standard it relates to. So you can see that we always want to connect them back to the standards. And with this one, you want to make sure that you're taking an active leaf. And so when I say an active leaf, you're not going to take a leaf that you just find on the ground. It's no longer active once it falls from the plant, but you're going to actually take the leaf from the plant itself. So it could be from a tree or some other type of plant that you have outside. And then you're going to put it in a large bowl. They do say to use a glass bowl just because it can get a lot of sunlight and then the children can kind of see from every angle what's going on. But you put the leaf in a bowl of lukewarm water and you leave it sitting in the sun, like near your window, for several hours, and then the children can come back with magnifying glasses and look at what's happening to the leaf. And what they're going to see are those tiny air bubbles along the edge of the leaf and on top of it. And they'll be learning about how the leaf is going through photosynthesis, taking on that sun, and the respiration process for the leaf. The other activity is just class plant or pet. Make sure that you are incorporating at least a plant into your classroom. So this wasn't linked to anything on Pinterest. It's just something that I personally like to promote because I don't see it very often, unfortunately, but it is really, really important. And if you're feeling super adventurous, you could definitely do both. I always had plants and a classroom pet each year. And then in the summer times, people used to ask, what do you do with it? I just take the pet home with me and then care for it until the next year. And so I do encourage you to do that. And that does link back to a standard as well. Then life cycles. So I used this image that I did find on Pinterest, and this is linked there. If you're into purchasing caterpillars for butterflies, or if you want to get ladybugs, you could certainly do so. Or if you're more into the natural exploration, you could do things like plant milkweed outside of your center so that butterflies are more likely to lay their eggs there, and then the children can explore the chrysalis as they actually develop develop right on the milkweed, and watch that process actually in nature rather than in the classroom. But watching that process, those life cycles in action, is a really important process as well for our young children. The next section is our physical sciences, which includes chemistry and physics. So at the preschool level, chemistry involves understanding how objects are similar and different and sorting objects by specific terms, which that might feel more like a math concept, but it's also included in science. So sorting by size, shape, color, texture is going to be part of that scientific process for chemistry. In addition, children should develop an understanding that all things are made up of matter and notice changes in matter, such as water in solid and liquid state, or as a gas as well when it steams. Physics then explores how objects move, variations of sound, and energy sources, such as the sun. So learning how the sun supports us as an energy source and helps things stay alive and grow. And I think you'll find that it's easiest to develop activities for sorting objects by specific attributes. That's something that we tend to do already fairly frequently. You'll also find that children will naturally explore how objects move in specific situations if they're given the opportunity and the correct materials. So you'll see that blocks and tubes can become ramps and tunnels, that for vehicles or balls, strings, balls, and blocks can become cranes where they can knock down buildings that they've created. And slides and various toys on the playground can also be used to explore which objects will go down the fastest. Even just exploring how different vehicles move across the different surfaces is part of physics. So the key is to really offer many materials and many opportunities for that exploration. And then so our teacher toolbox items for this section, the first one is the sound science with water xylophones. Such an easy activity to implement, and there's so many ways that the children can explore with this. So in this particular post, they used food coloring in the water. You don't necessarily have to do that, but it does make it easier for the children to see the water levels. But you could start by putting the water levels at certain spots, and then the children can explore tapping on the sides of the jars, on the tops of the jars, and kind of exploring what different sounds those make. And then they could even get into changing the water levels to see how does the sound change, how does the tone change as I change the water level or I change where I'm tapping on the glass. Pom Pom Drop, I included this because it is part of physics, but also to just show you that these activities don't always have to be something big and elaborate. They don't have to cost you a lot of money. They can be as simple as some cardboard tubes cut into different sizes, some that are whole, some with the tops cut off, and tape. And you want to allow the children to explore the different ways that they could set up these ramps on the wall and how that changes how quickly or in which direction the pom-poms will fall. I actually had a ball ramp set like this that someone had purchased for my own children. And I'll tell you that my boys spend hours recreating the ramps on the wall, but it doesn't have to be something that you purchase. It can be as simple as including tape and cardboard tubes in your center for the children to be able to create those on their own. And then simple machines, I loved this mommyocean.com. She had these great ideas for simple machines for children to explore. And her post actually included, what I liked about it was that it included a lot of different machines that you would want the children to be kind of exploring and creating and seeing how they work. So it includes levers, wheels and axles, pulleys, inclined plane, wedge, and screw. And then just remember to also always use that vocabulary so that the children are understanding what types of machines they're using and how they're actually working. Our next section is Earth and Space Science, which involves Earth structures, processes, and cycles, as well as the origin and evolution of the universe. And I know that sounds like really big and far off for preschool, but what it really involves is exploring and sorting different types of Earth materials like soil, rocks, and sand. They can also work towards understanding different uses for water, so such as drinking, hand washing, washing dishes or clothes, or watering plants. And they can explore the 4 seasons, identifying what they are and their observable characteristics or changes, such as the falling leaves or blooming flowers. And as part of that season's exploration, children will also explore how those changes affect their daily life. So do they need specific types of clothing for different seasons? How does the temperature change? Are there limitations to the activities that they can complete in the different seasons? And when we're looking at the origin and evolution of the universe, I know the first time I read that one, it really threw me for a loop too. But it's really focusing on objects they can identify in the day sky versus the night sky. So like sun and clouds in the daytime, stars and moon at night, and the different types of clouds that they'll see in the sky. So with this one, I think it's important to think outside the box a little bit with these topics. So just as an example, we don't have children at night when we could go outside and look up at the night sky and talk about the stars and the moon. So is there a way that you could recreate the evening sky in your classroom? And then how could you use that to let the children explore the night sky and the different things that they see in it? So a few teacher toolbox ideas, what makes night? And I really chose this one because while the standard is to identify the objects in the night, from that, children are going to develop their own questions. What makes night? How does night come about? And so this is a great activity where they can actually create the earth and stars, and then they can be the sun and mimic the rotation of the earth. And so they'll be able to talk about when the sun is on this side of the earth, it's daytime, but because it's on this side, it's nighttime on the other side of the earth. And if you add the little gold stickers, star stickers to it, they're going to see that in the night, those stars are going to kind of sparkle from the reflection of the sun on the other side. Another activity is sorting and classifying rocks. So you could take them on a nature hunt and you can collect a wide variety of different rocks in colors, shapes, textures, and then take those back to your classroom and let them sort and classify those different rocks. And there's a couple of different experiments too on my Pinterest board that you can do with those rocks then to look for things like, I'm slipping my mind now. I apologize. There were a couple other posts there. I do apologize. The other activity I found was how does a rain cloud work? So as part of this process, they're going to be looking at the different types of clouds that are in the sky. And one of those is going to be rain clouds. And then from there, they're going to have questions about where does the rain come from or how does a rain cloud work? And so you can do this simple experiment with them where they can recreate a rain cloud and see exactly how it does work. Our last section is actually the biggest section when we're looking at Pennsylvania. I don't know if it's the biggest section for other states as well. It might be a little bit smaller, but it's environment and ecology. So this is actually broken down into 4 sections. So I put it on 2 separate slides. So the first is ecology, which involves some of the same information as the biological sciences. So you can kind of cover both at the same time with some of your activities, but it really focuses more on the child's immediate surrounding environment, so where they're living. They'll also identify living and non-living organisms in their immediate surrounding environment, which will be a little bit different for everyone. And then identifying the basic things living things need to grow and identifying seasonal changes in their specific area. So you will see that that'll be a little bit different for each state. Children in Arizona, for example, are going to have different explorations than the children in Pennsylvania. And I can say that because I used to live on the West Coast and now I live on the East Coast and it is quite different. Second is the watersheds and wetlands, which is also more area and state specific. Like, for example, here they want them to identify various types of moving water specifically in Pennsylvania, and looking at the wetlands as an ecosystem in Pennsylvania. So that might be a little bit different for your specific state, but what they're going to be looking at is those different types of those different moving water types, the ecosystem, and then the aquatic and terrestrial habitats. Also looking at how the environment provides for the needs of people and the natural resources that we get from nature. So a couple of activities related to those two topics were inspecting different types of water. And I found this, which then just kind of stemmed into this activity, is this inspecting pond water. What you could really do, though, to look at a variety of types of water is take different types of water. So maybe from a local lake, from a river, from a pond, from a puddle, and put them in jars so that the children can explore them and look at how they are different and the differences in them. And then that could also stem into the aquatic and terrestrial habitats, because you might see different organisms within those bodies of water. Another is, why do leaves change colors? So this was a really cool experiment to talk about photosynthesis with the children. And you actually take actual leaves in the fall and crush them up and put them in rubbing alcohol in the jars, and then use coffee filters so that they can see how that color moves up and why the leaves change colors. Then the other two categories for environment and ecology are agriculture and society, and humans and the environment. So for these ones, we have agriculture and society, which includes what plants and animals need to grow, like sun, food, water, and how plants and animals grow and change over time. So they'll be exploring basic gardening tools also, and can begin to explore the basics of growing their own plants. I'm so sorry. With the humans and the environment, the children are going to be looking at what people need to survive, things in nature that can harm people, pets, and other living things, and then the ways that humans negatively affect the environment through pollution and waste. And that is a discussion that we have to start having with our preschoolers so that they can learn ways that we can reduce pollution and reduce waste and help our environment. And so these can feel a little bit difficult to cover, but just don't be afraid to take those lessons outdoors and to get messy. A couple of activities related to these are planting activities. So I actually linked to this Pinterest post because she had some really great ideas for easy to grow plants. So it's not necessarily that you need to be shown how to grow a plant, but she's had some really good ideas for easy to grow plants, which is something that we want in the preschool setting. We're teaching them how to grow. Some of these you could even harvest things from once they are grown, or you need to transplant them into a more garden setting, but they're going to see progress fairly quickly, which is going to maintain their attention. This activity also was really great for showing how oceans can be polluted by oil. And so you start with some clean water you could put that in your sensory center, put some animals and boats, and then you mix cocoa or coffee grounds with oil. And that acts as the pollutant that they can add to the water, and then they can observe and explore what exactly is happening to the animals and the boats as the water is being polluted. And then lastly is our scientific inquiry skills, which in this area, the children are making meaning from explorations and generating ideas and solutions based on their own observation of the natural and human worlds. Using their five senses. So they have to understand what their five senses are and how they use them. And then also using simple tools to explore solutions to problems or to find answers to questions that they have. And then also learning to communicate those experiences, their observations, their answers and ideas. And they can do that in a variety of ways through conversations, through representations or drawings, and through their behaviors. So you really want to allow opportunities for children to explore concepts and communicate their findings in a wide variety of ways. You don't want to limit them to only exploring with certain tools or only exploring in a certain area, or only communicating their findings in a specific way. So just a couple of things, like I said, it's important to not only let them use their five senses, but to teach them what the five senses are first. They kind of need that basis if they don't already have it. And we can't assume that all of our preschool children already know what their five senses are. If they weren't previously in a program or weren't in a high quality program, unfortunately, they may not have that background knowledge. So you kind of have to start from the beginning. This Sniff and Match relay was a really great way to kind of work on the sense of smell. They had to match different scents to the objects. Just a fun way to kind of practice that. Or you could give them a sensory walk. If you go on Pinterest, there are tons and tons of activities for using the five senses and different ways to introduce them, and practice using them. And then always don't forget the books. I'm always a big promoter of adding literacy to all of our learning centers, especially science. There's so much that the children can learn and explore from the books that you include, especially related to the specific topics that you're working on and the concepts that you're working on related to science. And so I do encourage you to follow me on Pinterest. My name is Penn Foster Sarah on there, and I actually have an entire Pinterest board devoted to explore, experiment, and excite with science in early childhood settings. And I hope that this information was helpful and exciting, and that you all got some ideas that you can take away and implement into your own practices. Thank you again for having me.
That was scary. I almost ended this entire meeting.